Hello, UK Crime Book Club. We are live with Ellery Lloyd, Paul and Colette, who are going to introduce themselves a bit better than I would. And we're going to be talking about the final act of Juliette Willoughby, which, look at this gorgeous cover. I just love it. It's really striking. It's kind of the woman in the dress, but not done in the same way that everybody else has done it, which is very clever. So would you like to introduce yourselves? Paul, shall we start with you?
Yeah, sure. I'm Paul Bleetos.
And I'm Colette Lyons, and together we write as Ellery Lloyd. And the final act of Juliette Willoughby is our third novel, and came out on Thursday.
Tuesday. No,
it was Thursday. Was it Tuesday? Thursday. Last week.
This week.
Yeah.
You're both same days that began with a T, so you finally covered.
Yeah.
So how has this week been for you? Congratulations on publication week.
Thank you.
What have you been doing to celebrate?
Lots of lovely podcasts.
Lots of podcasts, things like that. We're not really having a book launch until next week,
yeah,
are we?
So,
our daughter's sports day.
Yes, and sports day on Friday.
We did celebrate that night when it came out.
Yes, we did, yeah.
So what are you planning to...
It's always funny when a book comes out, because you sort of, it goes out into the world, but unless you're literally having a launch that day, it's sort of, it kind of, it's a funny...
Yeah, because it doesn't even necessarily end up on the bookshop shelves that day. So quite often you just have like a text from your like aunt or something. I can't find it. It's not in Waterstones.
But you, what are you planning to do for your actual physical launch next week?
We will have some white wine outside a bookshop in the sunshine.
And it looks like it's actually going to be sunny.
Yeah,
so we're going
actually sunny day. So we're quite pleased about that.
I've just been complaining about the fact that it's sunny in Manchester, but you two actually enjoy the sun.
Well,
it's in the evening, so you know it'll be. And at least I get to wear a dress without kind of a giant coat over the top, so I'm quite pleased about that. A raincoat, umbrella.
Better that than boring rain.
Yeah. So we've got we really need to get into the book now. I was saying before we went live, I absolutely loved this book. It's the way that everything comes together is something we can't really talk about. But what we can talk about is the characters that you've created. And for anybody who doesn't know, I mean, it's probably fairly obvious, you do write together, you are co-writers. So let's start with how that works. Do you have ground rules, things that, you know, do you both handle different characters? How do you go about the whole thing?
Yeah, we should explain probably. We're also a married couple, because it looks a bit like we're split screen, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it really does.
We're actually in
the same room.
So we're currently working on our fourth novel, and each book has been quite different.
So our first book, People Like Her, we just took a voice each. So there was an influencer, and there was a husband, and it was kind of alternate voices talking about each other, and then there was a stalker as well.
And the club had multiple voices. I think there were 4 or 5, and actually there were 4, I think, and we did a kind of a Vanity Fair style profile piece that ran throughout, and so we split those up. Final act of Juliette Willoughby, there's 3 main voices: Juliette herself, and then Patrick and Caroline, who we first meet when they're both art history students at Cambridge in the 90s.
And Juliette Willoughby is an artist in the 30s, and you get bits of her diary as well.
And other fragments of sort of other news stories and things like that we pepper in.
Died in a mysterious fire that's also destroyed her masterpiece, Self-Portrait of Sphinx. So they find her diary and start piecing together what happened, and it turns out to be a bit more suspicious than it appears.
But we took those voices separately and write them. But what tends to happen is we'll plot quite not intricately, like we have a chat. We plot very tightly. We have a chapter plan before we start, because otherwise it would just end up being nonsense. I think it would be like a game of consequences. So we need to know where each scene, where each chapter starts.
And then usually during about halfway through the first draft, we realise anyway that it's going to need much more tightening and like stuff.
New characters, or characters need to do different things. But by the time we have done sort of a second draft. We both write and edit everything, so we'll have done these individual voices in the first couple of drafts, and then it's kind of the book. Once the book has a shape, we both write, we both edit the whole thing. So yeah, it's a bit, I mean, I think there are ways in which writing together make it a lot more enjoyable and easier than I certainly would find sitting in a room writing something very plot driven by myself. So because we can talk about plot holes, or try and work out plot lines together, we're constantly discussing it. That makes it kind of, there's two brains working on it. It's so we benefit from that massively in that way, although we never write in the same room.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's because I'm a really annoying, noisy typer who laughs at their own jokes.
Yeah, basically. So yeah, we always make sure we're in different rooms for that. Otherwise, we definitely would not be a writing couple. We would not be a couple still if I were forced to write in the same room. Yeah, our daughter's got these they're not noise cancelling, they're ear defenders basically, which for some reason she started wearing recently.
I think it's
just while she's wandering around the house. But maybe I could wear those. Yeah, or I know we ever had to write in the same room.
Yeah, myself and my husband do work in the same room, but not on the same thing. So I can imagine you'd need a little bit of space in places. Yeah. The editing's interesting for me because you do edit each other's chapters.
Yeah.
And you're both quite comfortable with that because you've both edited before for other publications. But is it kind of nerve-wracking waiting to see what each other thinks of what you've done, and then nerve-wracking waiting for the changes?
I think it's more like a nice surprise, isn't it? Because it's like, you usually don't think, there's a big shock I've put in at the end of that chapter. I've done that really nicely. There's a joke she's going to like there. So it's quite nice having that like targeted reader. You think, right, I'm going to get you, someone's going to read it. And also I think because someone else has read it and we've enjoyed it and we remember it, it makes it a bit easier to then edit. It's not like, I spent all day crafting that paragraph and it's just gone into the void. Like you've read it, it was there. Yeah. I've kept it in a separate document just in case I need it ever.
And in case I cut it out. Don't like that. Paul's like, yeah, but I've kept that. I think it's a nerve. I mean, it's always nerve-wracking when you send something off to editors or agents because they're coming at it, and I think other writers we know have different approaches to how they feed things into their editors or agents. Some of them do it sort of 10 chapters at a time, or we've usually been through multiple drafts before it ever hits anyone else. And that's quite nice. So it's sort of we've really kind of done multiple edits by the time anyone else sees it. So I don't think it's nerve-wracking for each other, but it's definitely nerve-wracking when you send it out to someone who isn't each other.
Yeah, but I guess it's not like a kind of local thing, is it? It's a bit like they might just go, "What have you done?"
Yeah, this makes no sense.
There's just that possible that we got locked up in this like folie à deux. And we was like, "This is brilliant. We're so proud of this." And it was like,
genius. Why did they
done any of this?
I really like the idea of you maybe having little in-jokes, waiting for the other person to laugh at something that you've put in, knowing that it'll make your partner laugh is such a lovely thing. So do you just kind of chuckle to yourselves waiting for that?
I mean, he really doesn't make himself laugh. He's sort of like, occasionally he'll take one of our books off the shelf and he'll just go,
I might be laughing at one of your bits, Troy.
You could be, yeah. Probably not though, are you?
Well, seeing how you blurs so much, isn't it? Like,
seeing how you are together and how much fun you seem to have with it, do you ever get a cut-off point, or are you constantly working on the current project? Can you put it down and walk away if you need to, or is it just always squirreling away somewhere in the background?
Always actually. And if we are working on our next book at the minute, but we occasionally other ideas will come to us, and we sort of jot those down. Right, oh, that'd be a good title for that. Although, on the subject of titles, we have never once got one of our titles onto the actual cover of the book. Never.
Have you got champagne on ice waiting for that moment?
I mean, it will be vintage champagne by the time we get to crack that bad boy.
Literally every time.
Yeah, we're like, we've nailed it. We've got the best title, and then they're like, oh.
Because I remember, because this was the third book, so it's I remember when the editors took it, and I was scrolling down the emails like, we like this, and this, and then you roll down, but the title will have to change.
Yeah.
Like,
oh God. Of
course it will.
So yeah.
Right, we should really talk about the actual book, because I am fascinated by the two of you actually working and living together and everything else and juggling everything. But there's plenty more to discuss than that. So where did the idea come from? I'm wondering how much harder it is or easier it is to come up with an idea when you're both looking at playing to your own strengths, your own interests, things that you might want to go off and research. How much is, you already know beforehand, how much is through the research?
Well, this is sort of...
Well, we come up with the sort of world generally that the book's set in. So the first one, People Like Her, was set in the world of Insta-parents, sort of influencer parents. The second one was set in the world of private members clubs. And this one is sort of set in the art world and academia. And it really, it tends to be, it's areas that we know a little bit about and that interest us. So with this one,
you did an art history degree.
I did an art history degree.
Interested in the female surrealist. So this Juliette Willoughby is a sort of female surrealist. So she's sort of moving.
She doesn't exist. We made her up, but she's a kind of composite of lots of people in those circles. And Paul works in academia, so that's something that we know something about. And actually, one of the locations for this is Dubai, and I lived in Dubai for a few years. So we do tend to sort of pick things that we are really interested in and know a little about, and that makes us excited about researching, and actually it means that we know where to start when we're kind of researching. So yeah, this was quite research heavy. It meant a lot of trips to the British Museum, because there's an Egyptology element in this novel, which our daughter was quite keen on, so she's she'll happily spend hours looking at the kind of Egyptian rooms.
Willoughby's father, the artist's father, collects Egyptian artifacts. So there's all this kind of Egyptian stuff in her art, and as they're trying to work out what the hidden mystery of her painting is, they're kind of researching all the kind of Egyptian stuff as well. So that was fun. It was quite researchy, wasn't it? It
was quite researchy. We went to quite a lot, because there's a big. So we should probably. I guess we've sort of already said a bit about what the book is about, but it's set over 3 timelines over a century. Juliette Willoughby is a runaway heiress artist who moves to Paris with her older married lover Oscar. Her masterpiece is exhibited in the 1938 Paris Surrealist exhibition, which is a real exhibition, and she withdraws it after one night, and shortly after, she and Oscar perish in a fire at their home, which also destroys the masterpiece Self-Portrait of Sphinx. In the 1990s in Cambridge, Patrick and Caroline, 2 art history students,
find her diary and start kind of
they think they've uncovered the fact that the painting may still exist, and that the deaths may have been something more nefarious. And the Willoughby family, they happen to be going to university with a surviving member of that family. And so at that point, the Willoughby country house is kind of involved, and they start researching the kind of Egyptian stuff as well.
So there's like a murder or a disappearance in each strand, isn't there? And then there's the third strand,
which is set in Dubai, where Patrick, one of the students in the 90s Cambridge, is selling the rediscovered Self-Portrait of Sphinx,
which is now worth a fortune, of course, because she's been rediscovered. She's this kind of lost female artist, and the painting's worth a fortune.
And the person trying to sell it is the only surviving member of the Willoughby clan linked to Juliette. and he is found brutally murdered in his hotel room in Dubai. And so we're unpacking how all of these are linked, and how the key to unraveling all of this is in the painting.
Yeah, Harry's murder makes everything really interesting, because you're really not quite sure what's going to happen with it. And there's quite a few shocks. We in the book club, we read a lot, but yeah, there were a lot of shocks in this one. Things that you just kind of, if you looked back, you could probably see how it was woven in, and how just subtly and delicately you've both done it. But yeah, go into different. I can't say any of the scenes, can I? But because it would give the twist away, which doesn't help. So I will flip this, and we won't talk about Harry because that would give too much away. But we could talk about how I found it really interesting when you were writing about Juliette and we're reading her diaries, and you realise that there is nothing about this woman. She's, at one point, I think she's described as a poetic footnote for Oscar. And it's really interesting how often that seems to happen. These women are only kind of, they're just this partner to somebody, and their own lives are just forgotten about. So it was really interesting to see you go into the library and unboxing old things that haven't even been documented properly. You know, they're just kind of on the back burner, and Sam slowly going through things. Made it really interesting, and really made me wonder how many women are just cast off to history as somebody else's lover and not much else.
I mean, the surrealists, it definitely happened a lot. You know, Lee Miller, extraordinary artist and photographer in her own right, you know, was Man Ray's partner, and that's the first thing anyone ever says when they, you know, took Dora Maar, who was Picasso's lover. Again, you know, it's Max Ernst and Lenore Carrington. They were talked about in reference, you know, to their sort of often older, often married male counterpoint, or, you know, lover or husband. And so, yeah, I mean, lots of people are doing, you know, lots of amazing work to kind of, you know, ensure that these women are exhibited and written about. But that's definitely been a process. And that's one of the reasons that actually we wanted to set this over such a long time period, you know, because in sort of 80s, 90s, no one was really, you know, or certainly there wasn't a kind of groundswell of interest in women artists that there is, thankfully, now. And so having that kind of time period where actually the value has accrued of this, like, masterpiece, and, you know, that kind of was important to the plot, but also just mirrors what has happened.
You've got Juliette, Oscar and Austin, who are fictional, and obviously you've got other fictional characters, but there's a lot of reality in the book as well. I found that really interesting, how you can weave fictional people in with all of the facts, and it just is seamless. I'm guessing it took a lot of effort to make that look effortless.
It went through a lot of drafts, didn't it?
Yeah.
And actually, I think the bit that the sort of spine that survived was always the Juliette story, and that was that it was working and everything else around it, so that all the shocks didn't come at the end, or like things weren't given away. So we always had that spine, and we always had the structure, and then it was just thinking about how things fitted into
and a lot of the things that, you know, the places, for example, that, and the things we've written about in the book. So the Wit Library at the Courtauls, I sort of went and visited, and, you know, the kind of like it saw the shelves and saw how it's stored, and spoke to the archivists there. And a plot point there is that, you know, that's where that they find proof, what they think is proof, that Self-Portrait of Sphinx survived.
But it's always getting that balance, isn't it, of the research, and then not forgetting that it's meant to be like a gripping murder mystery as well. So, you know, I think that was something that we kind of worked on quite hard, so that it doesn't, you know,
it doesn't feel too dense, and you're not getting bogged down in the detail,
kind of confused or jumping around too much.
You know, little cameos from Andre Breton and
yeah. Well, I was thinking, because you know, we had
Darley.
But of course, all the surrealists are dead, so they can't sue us.
Yeah.
Whereas in The Club, which was our previous novel, you had to be very careful that none of the characters were like too much like any living celebrity.
Yes, which they weren't meant to be based on, but you
didn't accidentally want to.
Yes, annoy an A-lister, a litigious A-lister.
So this one,
Darley's not about to sue us.
For someone to come in and do their thing.
One of the points of view characters, because it's as you said, it's mainly written from Juliette, Patrick, and Caroline. So Patrick is a really interesting character because he has quite a controlling father, who is a really interesting character, and you see Patrick wrestle throughout the story with the man that his father is and who he becomes around him and how hard he tries not to be like him. And we learn where he kind of succeeds and fails. And I thought that was a really interesting thread all the way through, just kind of seeing how Patrick develops throughout. I thought that was a brilliant thread.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, good. Yeah. No, that was a really interesting one to write as well, I think. And it was, and that, because I think that you're exactly right. That's what he's got his desperate desire to impress his dad, while knowing that his dad in some ways is really quite slippery and self-obsessed
and probably quite narcissistic, and his dad's never going to be that impressed with him actually, because he doesn't, or it's about him.
His dad is going to be most impressed with him when he reminds his dad most of himself. That generally is, when his dad's seeing himself reflected in him, that's when he's going to be most proud of it.
But you have these, like it's a little bit like the character in Saltburn that kind of ends up being the main protagonist, right? And sort of dancing around naked at the end. I forget what the name of the actors.
Have you just completely lost track of your point in the
thought
of him dancing
around naked? No, it's like
naked.
It's the person who is in that circle but isn't quite, and has a little bit of perspective on it, but is still kind of trying to fit in. And that's sort of what you have with Patrick. He's nearly one of them, but he's not really.
And also he's got his dad trying to get him to
push him sort of
partly because they're both art dealers, so his dad and him are art dealers, so he's like, right, get in with those, make
they're
going to
be your clients,
to get in with these people and try and sell them art
the irony being actually that the sort of people that, and it's a plot point so I can't unpack it too much, but the irony being that in the 90s the kind of he thinks it's the aristocrats who are going to be buying all this art, and actually it ends up being that they're the ones that are flogging it all because they can't afford to keep their country houses, and it's kind of the sort of tech billionaires and hedge fundies that are kind of making the money and actually are going to be Patrick's clients, sort of in
all the people that he's bringing
but he's sucking up to, like, have got no money,
all the people he's ignoring, and
they're the ones that are in the market for kind of 100 million quid Salvador Dali painting. So
the contrasts and parallels between Juliette and Caroline as well are fascinating, because you've got Juliette who runs away to Paris for love, falls in love straight away, and Caroline who very much doesn't want to do what people before her in her family have done. She wants to put her career first. She wants to get her life together. If she's going to fall in love, that can come later. And it's really interesting to see how that kind of changes throughout.
And I think that those two things are quite class linked as well, aren't they? Because Caroline actually, like, she has to. She doesn't come from privilege, and so she's like, no, I'm completely career focused. This is something that I want to do. She has her reasons, for sort of emotional reasons, for wanting to do that as well. But there's no privilege there. That whereas kind of Juliette's, running away to kind of be with Oscar, I think. I mean, again, there are reasons for that as we unpack throughout the novel. But it's because she comes from this, huge wealth. It's not a thought out. It's like, okay, I'm off I go to Paris, and there's not a sort of unpacking of, oh well, actually, therefore I'm going to be living in a freezing flat in, you know, and eating onion soup, and, you know, not having anything very much at all, which, you know, the irony being that obviously, you know, a lot of the work that was created by people in sort of starving in these garrets ended up being worth a fortune, but at the time they weren't living lavishly at all.
Yeah, I guess also one of the things is it's a sort of love story between Patrick and Caroline, isn't it?
So it's those two kind of love stories. Actually, I guess 3 love stories if we count Athena and Freddie. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
See, the thing is, I've read this more recently than you two probably, so there'll be things that you are now 1 or 2 books in advance, and you'll be going back like, I've not read this for 2 years. Who's that person?
Who was that? Yeah.
I did love kind of Juliette's so young when she runs away to Paris, and you just kind of think, and she's so very young at heart as well, and she's caught up in this idea, but then they're in this cold flat and she's under every blanket in the flat trying to keep her toes warm, and kind of, and it still doesn't make alarm bells ring in her head that maybe this isn't quite the romantic dream. You know, there are other reasons as well, as you said, but it's not quite the romantic dream she thought it was going to be, which kind of makes it all the more romantic in an odd way.
Yeah.
She stayed.
Well, I don't know if it makes it more or less romantic, but I mean, that was really inspired. But when you look at these biographies and you hear it's like a passionate love affair, and she saw him across the room. You know, that happens to lots of these kind of you know, young female artists or people.
And then you're like, oh, he was 52,
you get to the
and
picture
she
in the
was
middle.
19, and
he's got his sort of trousers pulled up halfway to his chest, you know, halfway to his chest,
little ball patch, and like, you know,
well, you know, people can be feeling with a little ball patch, Colette.
But yeah, but yeah, it's always, it is quite interesting, those descriptions. You're like, oh yeah, okay, no alarm bells there then at that point. But
and it turns out he's already married twice. Yeah.
Whereas these days he would be called out a lot on Twitter.
Yes.
Rightfully so.
Yes. I feel like it would have been cancelled quite early doors.
So, which leads me quite nicely onto social media and all of the other different things that you both have to manage. Do you have kind of set ideas on who does what, or do you both do a bit of everything? How do you balance that between the two of you? I've got a nerve somewhere here.
Me doing it. Give you an idea. So our first novel is set in the world of Instagram influencers, and Paul, you have actually got Instagram on your phone, but I don't think he would be. Posted. He's never posted. If I were to,
I'm mystery man.
Yeah. Yeah. So no. Yeah, no, social media is me, and even then I'm not particularly good at it. I mean, you know, I am very, I have another sort of job career alongside writing, and some of that does involve working with people who are very, very good at social media, and I'm just aware what a skill it is. To be very good at it, and consistent with it, and monitoring it, and it's another job, and I can't have another one of those. I don't need another one of those. So you know what is lovely about it though is that you do, and so Paul had 2 novels out about
20 years ago. 2006, 2007,
and.
I'm sorry, how is that 20 years ago? That's terrifying.
Well, yeah.
No, was it 20 years ago? No, 18 years ago.
So 2006.
But when your first novels came out, I don't think, if Goodreads existed, it wasn't a thing, really. Like Amazon certainly wasn't really where people were reviewing books anyway, and certainly I don't think Instagram did exist, and Twitter probably didn't either. So that in the moment feedback, that like connection with, there were no podcasts, you know, but also that
it was before
that
as well.
That contact readers you didn't have.
Yeah, that was just literally, you had to go to the bookshop and see it.
Yeah. So, you know, that is something that's really nice. Like that kind of, you know, people DMing you or tagging you in reviews is it's a nice way to kind of connect with people and hear what they think. If it's nice. If it's not, don't tag me. Don't do that.
I can't understand why anybody would do that.
You're welcome to your opinion, but just don't tag me.
And actually, people seem to really like it.
Yeah, this one has got such a lovely response. Yeah,
because the other thing is when people, it's like people have got a beautiful photo on Instagram, and then the review is like, oh, 2 stars. This is really boring. You know? Oh,
not with this one. I hasten to add.
I've got 2 words for you, and I'm gonna see the reaction from you when you tell me about it. Reese Witherspoon.
Oh,
you must have known what 2 words I was going to go with.
No. You looked a bit nervous.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, we got one with a little sticker on it.
Oh, I forgot that you got. That must be so lovely getting the book with the sticker on.
That one hasn't.
I
can't reach that. It's there.
Is it there?
Anyway. Yes. Reese Witherspoon. So yes, the club was selected as a Reese Witherspoon book. I was getting the ladder out. Reese Witherspoon book club pick, and that was like winning the lottery. It was incredible.
That is a Dutch edition.
The club.
With the Reese's sticker on.
Yeah. We.
Well, actually, that shows you, doesn't it? It goes around the world, and people know. I mean, people know Reese Witherspoon. They know the book club.
So that was amazing.
So how did you find out that the club had been chosen, and what kind of happens? Do you get to talk to Reese? Do you?
Well, no. No. Tragically not. We talk to Reese's people.
And you get a video when it comes out. Then you have a video of her holding your book and talking about it and saying what she enjoyed about it, which is quite amazing.
And you know, Reese's team are just absolutely lovely, and they very much treat kind of authors that have been Reese picks as kind of their kind of little family. So you know, you kind of get Christmas cards and you get invited to events. They're great.
But you have to keep it secret, don't you?
Yeah. So I got a phone call. I'd taken our daughter to the cinema to. It turns out a wildly age inappropriate film. It was a Christmas movie that was terrifying, that had been sold as a sort of warm, lovely, you know, kind of elves and snow, and actually it was kind of about death. So she kept running in and out of the cinema, and I got this phone call and I was like, oh, it's from the States, that's weird. So I kind of ran out as well, and luckily the really nice woman who worked in the cinema sort of could tell that I was taking quite an important phone call, and sat our daughter down and gave her chocolate ice cream.
Oh, I love that.
Sorry, we're a what? So yeah, that was amazing, but we had to keep it secret. So that was the beginning of December, and it wasn't announced until the 1st of March. And so
all through Christmas,
we didn't tell
anyone
at all. So we knew.
It's such a big thing that they like to make. You know, Reese makes the announcement, and you know, people are like speculating. They drop hints, and in the run up.
But no, we didn't tell anyone.
It's also just my family. I know it would get out, and then you just have like a remote cousin or something like going on Facebook. Well done, Paul.
And my parents wouldn't have a clue who Reese was anyway, so we were a
little bit anxious about it slipping out, you know. Then
so we were lucky because obviously each other knew, and you know, writers who write on their own.
And you're walking around the house a bit going, Reese's book club, Reese's book club.
So yeah, that was cool.
So exciting. So again, that's a big.
And it meant we had 5 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list, so that was.
And you can see people going through it on the app, can't you? And I'm up to chapter 3. oh, this is really warming up now. So it's not like just usually you get that overview of how people are experiencing it. You can see people chapter by chapter going, oh, I didn't see that coming. Or
that's really interesting. I think I'd find it quite hard to discuss a book while I was reading it.
Yeah, people do seem to like to, though. I mean, I don't think they have the app anymore, actually, because I don't know. But yeah, at that point, there was,
Probably takes quite a lot of moderation, I'd imagine, with so many people.
Yeah, I don't know actually, and also I suppose for spoilers, because once it's like it's tricky. There was someone that spoilers are a funny thing when people are reviewing. Like there was a review that, I mean, we don't tend to go on to Goodreads because I feel like that's a safe space for readers, not authors. But one of the first reviews was like the entire plot without a kind of spoiler thing. I was like, come on. Nobody wants to read the entire plot in a Goodreads review. So yeah, it is quite funny to how people sort of moderate themselves when they're kind of talking about books and reviewing.
Yeah, I hate spoilers, and I'm very careful with what I ask, because I think if it happens in the first kind of 3 to 5 chapters, depending on how many words that is, and I'll kind of read the blurb once I've read and go from that. But it's a tricky thing, and I hate it when people spoil books for me. Luckily, I've got a dreadful memory, so I hope I don't remember by the time I get to it. But no, people should really behave.
But you always look forward and see the ending of things, don't you? You quite.
If I know that I'm not going to finish a book, then or a TV series, I'll read the last chapter, or I'll watch the final, because I'm like, oh, I wonder where that plot's going. And so which I know is naughty, but if I feel like I'm not kind of invested enough, just plot wise, I find it interesting to see like how it's been wrapped up. But yeah,
I think it's fair enough to do that for yourself privately, but if you then put that online, we could not be friends.
Yeah, don't worry.
I think that's the line. That's the balance.
Never do it. We can't use social media. So.
I can Google. I can't use social media.
The Googles. I can use the Googles.
A professional person with a job.
You mentioned, I'm just listening to you two chuckle away together, and I've completely lost my train of thought at what you actually mentioned. So I'll go to we talked a bit about how your idea comes together, and that you have an outline. So you have like a chapter guide of what's going to happen, and you both know who's writing what. Do you really have big discussions about how you go into, about what exactly is going to happen in the story? And do you know the end before you start?
Yes. It might change, but yes. So what we tend to do is we're just looking at this to give you an idea of our amazing plotting. You see that? There's a board in front of us. Murder? Question mark.
Yeah. There's a board with stickies on there, which is where we plotted out.
Yeah.
This novel, and now we're plotting out the next one.
Yeah. So we'll absolutely know where it starts and ends. Sometimes that changes. The start tends not to, actually, but we'll usually have a plot plan, then run off because we've got excited and do maybe like 20,000 words, and then we put it down, because actually once we're 20,000 words in, we've got an idea of the voices of the characters, which makes it a little easier to make decisions about what they might do in any given situation that we throw them into. And then we'll sit down and do another replot. But you know that it depends on the book. And the final act of Juliette Willoughby was quite a juggling act, because there's 3 timelines. So we tried multiple ways of plaiting those together, because it's a complex plot, but we didn't want the reader to be confused at any point. That took quite a lot of kind of, we knew the trajectory of each of the timelines, but it was how those worked together, which we sort of fatted and unfatted a few times. But yeah, I mean, it's a process, isn't it?
Yeah.
Always. And sometimes we put like, but I can't remember if it worked quite like this for Juliette, but definitely for our first book, we sort of got really overexcited, wrote half of it, we sort of did know the end of it, and then I was like, this plot doesn't work, and so I just stopped writing, and Paul continued like Roadrunner, like he kind of hadn't realised that he'd run out of cliff, and I was like, this doesn't work.
I'll catch up.
I'll catch up. I'll have a think and I'll catch up. Yeah. And I never did, because I was like, I don't think it's got work. And so yeah, we had like a novel that was technically finished, but didn't actually have like one of the main voices like running through it. And then actually we did kind of put it down for a few weeks, and then did come up with kind of how to resolve that. But yeah.
I've remembered now. I was going to say, you mentioned earlier that you're working on something at the moment. Can you say anything about that yet, or is it too soon?
It's set in London and it involves time travel. That is,
and there's
a murder in it, possibly several. But yes, that's it's.
There's definitely a murder in it.
Oh, at least one, probably more.
As many as we need.
Yeah.
That's a good point. How did you come to decide together to write kind of crime fiction?
Because
one of you start writing and there was a dead body on page 3 and you were like, yeah, this is it.
Oh, now it's crime fiction, yeah.
But actually, I think that's what makes it possible to work together. Because in terms of knowing at the end, we know there's going to be like a crime with a mystery attached that's going to be solved. You know, so talking to a sort of literary novelist friend of mine, and he's like, I'm not quite sure if it's a novel yet or just like 3 related novellas. Well, that wouldn't work if we're working together, you know, knowing the sort of...
It's driving forward. We know that it's genre, within reason.
It's got to grab people and work as a mystery. And that sort of, you know, dictates a lot of decisions that we have to make around kind of pacing.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think...
Why did we do that? Well, we went on holiday together before our daughter was born, and all of the books that Colette took on holiday had "dead" in the title.
Yeah, I mean, I don't use
relate. Can't relate at all.
Actually, for some reason in the airport, I'd like done a sweep. I'm like, oh, dead again, like dead.
Dead, yeah. Appointment with dead.
Yeah.
So you know, so you are. I mean, I do. You know, I read the genre as well, but that is your go-to genre for what you want to read on holiday.
Yeah.
And that we end up then discussing about, you know, what works and what doesn't. And, you know.
So that's Paul had written 2 novels previously, but they were kind of.
But I'd forgotten to put in murders.
He did forget. That's a shame. So we.
Then no one bought them.
No.
Yeah.
What you've done there,
missing
Paul.
ingredient
You've
was
forgotten
murder.
the murder. Yeah, it's what I read. It's what I like. It's what I think works. Writing as a duo, and actually, the first book we wrote, People Like Her, started off much more gently. It was kind of quite. I mean, I hope and think, and weve been told it is quite funny.
It doesn't have a murder.
It doesn't actually have, yes. But I guess that was less us kind of starting in a genre, but more just knowing that we didn't want it to be a gentle comedy throughout. Like, you know, we wanted to use that as a vehicle to kind of, I guess, explore something which I think is quite dark, which is kind of the use of children in social media and, you know, and that kind of, what could potentially happen, and so it sort of lent its. I guess it lent itself to the genre. And
I'd also say, you know, the genre lends itself to doing that. I think crime as a genre is. I love that. You know, I really like crime that like explores the setting or something.
Yes.
You know, I'll always be looking if we're going to like Italy. Right, I want crime novels set in Italy for this holiday or something. You know, that kind of, you know, I think as a genre, it's a really nice way of exploring kind of places and locations.
And it's, you know, us being a married couple, with a child, I think it's probably one of the reasons that we don't really do like domestic noir. Because it would feel a little bit too much, if it's like married couple who live in, suburban North London, who we're like, oh well,
it's always
we're writing about us. Yeah,
it's always the husband that turns out to be dodgy.
Yes.
Anyway, you can't do that many. But that would be weird if you kept writing that.
And I love reading them, but I just we've never gravitated towards that sort of thriller writing, because I think it would just feel a bit too sort of. We like writing places that allow us to research and are a bit of an escape.
Yeah, it's understandable not wanting to write domestic noir, because then you'd either not be invited to the festivals because everyone's looking at Paul, or you'd be invited because people are hoping it's going to kick off and they can get a bit of excitement. There's kind of
actually
staying away from it.
I don't think I told you this, but there's a lovely writer called Emily Freud, who has just announced a new book deal, and the first book in her 2-book deal is about a married writer couple who get cancelled for some reason. Hope she doesn't know something we
all too easy.
Yeah, and I think and then there's some kind of murder that happens that they get blamed for or something like that. So yes, I've had lunch with her a couple of times, so I do wonder whether she's.
Did she have a notebook in a handbag and just
It'd be nice to do at lunch. Sorry,
I would imagine it's not based on you two. Let's hope not. We've not got much time left. We've got about 10 minutes. So I want to talk about balancing historical. We're going to pretend that 1990s isn't classed as historical, because that's horrific. So we've got the 1930s, 1990s and present day. And you were talking about enjoying writing the settings. That must have been doubly fun when you're looking at, Paris in the past and Dubai in the present, and just kind of balancing all of that. But it also must have been tricky with the details as well, that you're not putting something that happened in the 90s in the 30s by accident.
They pulled out his mobile phone.
But actually that was the funny thing about writing the 90s stuff, because you'd sort of forget, and then you'd be like, oh, my phone's ringing in my college room, or in our room at uni. It's like, well, no, it wasn't. It would have been your payphone might have been ringing. Your mum would ring your payphone and someone would scribble something with a.
But you didn't have a mobile at uni, did you?
I had a pager.
Oh wow!
I married a much older man. No, I didn't.
There was a brief.
He's a year older than me. I had a mobile.
That was 1997. Everyone in my uni had pagers, but they didn't really work. You'd ring up someone from a payphone. You'd say, "Oh, tell Matt I'm down in the bar." Or we're all meeting here, and then about midnight, the pager would go off, and you'd realise where everyone was.
I remember ringing the phone line to send a page to somebody. It's the most awkward thing.
I mean, completely pointless. Completely pointless.
I think I only ever did that to send a message to myself, to see if my pager was working. Yeah, so that was but actually the 30s, the thing that we did was we found a load of old travel guides to Paris from the 30s.
So literal guidebooks from the 30s, sort of in English, which were quite useful.
We read we were reading lots of kind of books and biographies, but in terms of thinking about where would you actually eat and looking at
and what
where
would it
people
cost
are moving around, so you've sort of got that and you're kind of a bit confident there of how that works, because it's written for English tourists, isn't it? And it's if you're traveling to Paris, this is the train line you'll get in on, and so that kind of research was quite fun, and that's quite they're kind of they just buy them online and they're really good.
That was and Cambridge we both know quite well, so that was quite fun to write.
And then Dubai,
and we went up there a couple of times.
And you've written 2 travel guides to Dubai.
I have written 2 travel guides. I was going to say I'll try and find them, but I won't. I don't know whether I wrote 2 guidebooks.
Paul will be up a ladder again.
And wrote 2 kind of travel guides. So I knew it well. Although actually, I have to say we went there. Paul hadn't been, and we went on a research trip, and it had. I was there for 2 years, from 2008 to 2010.
Quick maths.
Yeah, quick maths. It was, I mean, really, really different. So
Just
that
in
was
terms
a
of the
useful
physical
trip.
landscape.
Physical landscape and how busy it was and where people hung out and what it looked like. And yeah, it felt, it felt much busier and more cosmopolitan and than I was there.
But then all of that was relatively easy compared to the first draft of the club that we wrote during lockdown, and we decided to set in America, in like Long Island.
It's not set in America. It's set in an island off the coast of Essex, but we set it in the Hamptons where neither of us had ever been, and so we're like googling like what colour is the sand?
What colour is the mud? Yeah. Well, also it's that thing of like, again, we knew it was coming out in the States as well, so that was like, people are going to read this in the Hamptons.
Yeah.
And like, these people know.
And actually, we have a couple of friends who are usually our first readers, and we gave one of them a first draft, and she was like, I love the plot, but she's like, have you ever met any rich Americans? Because I don't think this. I was like, that is a good point. So yeah, it got set in Essex instead.
Fair enough. We're really running out of time, but one final question for you both. When you were planning Juliette's diary pages, one of the things that I loved was that some of them are as long as a chapter, which sometimes you just get, this much on a page, which is great. And they're always really well written, but I really like it when, it's expanded a little bit. So we can really get into the mindset of the character and see everything that's going on.
Yeah.
Are either of you diary writers yourselves, or did you study old diaries, or did you just write the diary entries?
We've got a couple of really lovely books. This one's really nice. Oh no, is it Letters to Gwendolyn?
I think it's her other book.
But there's an amazing writer called Celia Paul who wrote. Again, I hate to say it, but she was a lover of Lucian Freud. So she again amazing artist in her own right. But a lot of the book is about kind of her relationship with him. So that's literally her diary entries, and I think we've got Lenore Carrington's as well.
Yeah, I quite like to read old, like.
Dorothea Tanning as well. So we read who's another extraordinary female surrealist artist. Celia Paul's not surrealist, but we kind of read around those, which was really useful.
Yeah. Well, that's also it. Like lots of the stuff, you read stuff from the 30s and try just to try and get that kind of voice and
And the language, right? Yeah.
And the way people write, yeah. Do you keep a diary? No, I mean,
no. No, I was always too self-conscious to write a diary. So I'd write I'd occasionally tried when I was a teenager, and I'd write like one sentence, and I'd be like, "Ooh!" when I read it back the next day. So yeah, no, it was not never have been. You don't, do you?
I did.
Do you diary? I've never seen him do it anyway.
Well, I wait until you're asleep and I pull it out from under the pillow. So sick of
her. She chopped my favourite sentence out of I was so
no,
cross.
But I did like when I lived in Japan, I kept a diary. And I've got a diary of when I met you.
Yeah. I found it the other day actually, it's in the book.
It says Met Colette.
Yeah, it just says Met. Literally, saw Colette today. Saw Colette again. Colette sick. Colette better.
You read it? Is that what it is?
I mean, I've looked through it, yeah.
What were we looking for?
I mean, I was tidying out the terrible chaos of the drawers.
I think it's far better to not have a diary.
Most thoughts. Colette better.
It's for future biographers.
Right. Anyway, it's in the bottom drawer. Read it.
Is it? Thanks.
Yeah.
I love that. Colette's sick. Colette better. Very insightful. I love it. I do like the fact that mobile phones weren't invented until it was too late. So there is no record that we don't want of our childhoods, which is great.
Oh, thank God. Thank God.
I do feel sorry for people now.
I know. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you both so much. This has been the most brilliant hour. I've really enjoyed getting to know more
thank
about
you.
behind the scenes. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us, and I hope you'll come back for the next book.
Definitely.
We definitely will.
Really lovely to talk to you. Great questions.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right.